Where you lead, I will follow. Anywhere that you tell me to. If you need me to be with you, I will follow where you lead. Today we're joined by Allison Sullivan to talk about the Gilmore Girls.
Welcome to Pop Culture Catechism, conversations about music, movies, and the longings of the human heart. Let's get started.
Okay, before we get started, I need to let you know that we are winding down the end of season 3. It's been a big season. We've had hundreds of thousands of downloads. It's had awesome guests and awesome episodes, and we're going to be taking a little break in October. So we're going to have a couple more episodes in September, and then for October 2023, we're going to be taking a break. So I just want to ask you to do something for me, if you would, pretty please. If you are new here, but you like what you hear and what you see during this time, I'd encourage you to go back and check out some of our previous episodes from the past 3 seasons, because we've got some good ones, and I bet you would enjoy them. If you've been with us for a while and you've been listening and watching for a while, then I would encourage you to maybe take the next step. Have you written us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify? Have you followed me on Instagram, Facebook, etc.? Have you ever sent an episode to a friend and be like, hey, you'd really like this, I think? So if you've been around for a while, I really encourage you to do that, and stay tuned for season 4. I'm going to Awaken Catholic at the end of October to film a bunch of new stuff in the Awaken Theater Studios, and we'll have new episodes for you in November for season 4. I'm excited. Thank you so much. Enjoy the episode. What's more important to you, doing the best you can with the blessings you've been given, like Hailey Bieber, or blazing your own trail, like Lady Gaga? Do you like structure, like Bill Gates, or do you seek passion, like Steve Jobs? Freedom, like Miley Cyrus, or more relationship, like 2009 Miley Cyrus? But then, no matter what you choose or who you are, how do you respond to setbacks and failures? If you can't tell by the speed at which I'm talking or the flurry of pop culture references, today we are talking about the beloved early 2000s sitcom, The Gilmore Girls. And I am so glad today to be joined by the host of the Sinner Saint Sister podcast, who also has over 1 million followers on TikTok. By the way, her name is Allison Sullivan. If you're in the Catholic podcast world and you listen to a lot of Catholic podcasts, you might know her. She's a sought after speaker. You have a book, right?
I do.
You do have a book. Yeah. What's the name of your book again?
It's called Rock, Paper, Scissors.
Rock, Paper, Scissors. That's right. I'll ask you to tell us a little bit more about that in a second. And so today we're going to talk about Gilmore Girls. And this is just, I know from my wife and a lot of my lady friends through the years, they just love this show. And there's something that really speaks to their hearts. So we're going to dive into it today. If you don't know who I am, my name is Mike Tenney. I'm a Catholic speaker and worship leader from Washington, D.C. I spent over a decade teaching Catholic high school theology and trying to make it big as a rock star at night. And now I'm blessed to speak and lead music for thousands of people each year at events all over the place, and through this show, Pop Culture Catechism. This is Pop Culture Catechism. It's the gospel according to pop music and movies, where we take a look for God's love in the media that you're plugged into. So then when we unplug and we put away our tablets and iPhones and all that sort of thing, we can go out in the real world and live God's love and know God's love in our hearts in practical, real ways. So that's our goal for you by the end of this episode, listeners, that when you unplug, you're going to have some real, actionable, tangible, practical ways that today you can live God's love and know God's love. I want to give a special thank you to our patrons who make the show possible through popculturecatechism.com, and to our sponsor of this episode, catholicmerch.store. All the Catholic swag you want can be found there, and it all supports the shows here at Awaken Catholic. I want to welcome to the show Allison Sullivan. Allison, how you doing?
Hello, Mike Tenney. This is such an honor. I don't get to be a guest very much. It's so nice for the role reversal.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm so glad to have you on. You've been on my radar as somebody to have on for a long time. And Taylor Schroll, who was on our God of War episode, he and I are often talking podcast stuff. And I was like, who've been some of your best guests? And he was like, Allison Sullivan. You got to have her on your show. I was like, all right, so great. It's time to reach out. So yeah, I'm really glad to have you. So tell us about you and who are you? A little bit about yourself for those who don't know.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Allison, and I am thick in the middle of raising children, to be honest with you. We have 5 kids, and I tell you what, they are my greatest joy and my greatest stressor all at the very same time. They push me to my furthest edge and then pull me right back in. And I have a couple of teenagers now. And so this all feels apropos as we sit down and talk about the Gilmore Girls, because I watched this as not a teen, but as a young adult when it very first came out. And I have recently rewatched it with my adolescent daughter, and it was a completely different experience. So that's just kind of interesting. But I'm raising kids. I love being married. I feel like my husband is my greatest earthly blessing. Our home is, I feel like, one of my greatest gifts, and to whom much has been given, I feel like much is expected. So we are flinging our doors wide open, and it is pretty much consistently littered with the bodies of children that belong to other people. I feel really, really honored and blessed that we have just become the gathering house. I've prayed for that for a long time. So that feels like a huge blessing. So when I say that I'm thick in the middle of kind of cohabitating with adolescents, I mean that in just an unexpected way of really just not even all my own. So I love teenagers. I feel like young adults are at this really unique position of being young enough to still be searching, and yet old enough to have some life experience where you really do have some wisdom, and yet you're humble enough to go looking for more information. And so it's a really neat age to be involved with. And so as far as like some of my loves, it is that age of human, and that affects my ministry, which is my work. So I do a lot of speaking and traveling to speak, churches, Bible studies, events, things like that, conferences. I love a retreat setting is my very favorite. I really love sitting with other women. I love deep conversation, which is another Gilmore Girls, really strong element of what's lovable about that.
So tell people about Sitter Saint Sister, your podcast. We'll try to send some people your way because it's a great show.
Yeah, thank you. So I really love friendship. I think that we need each other. We belong to one another. And I feel like we're operating at our highest and best selves when we are thick in community, when we're deep into community. And so I have often wondered, like, what are my talents? I don't really know. I've recently just kind of settled on my talents are surrounding myself with people that are better than me, with people that are smarter than me, kinder than me. I just have really, really great community. And as I was having really deep conversations and relating with people, I would sit back and just marvel at, I am so blessed to be on the receiving end of such wisdom. And it felt like my civic duty to like pull these people into a closet. And initially that was literal, like come into my closet with me with my iPhone and say what you just said again. And that's how the podcast started. It was like, I'm friends with these people who don't have a microphone. These people need a microphone. Yeah. And so in the early stages, I was incredibly annoying, but my friends were brilliant. And I took myself so seriously. Oh my gosh. I listened to my podcast voice and I'm like, girl, get over it. And so it started with my friends in a closet, and the episodes were just things that we thought other women needed to hear. And it has slowly evolved into my friends saying, that'll do. That's enough of that.
I feel like
we don't have microphones.
I feel like it's really well crafted. Like when I listen to your show, I'm like, whoa, this is like super organized. And there's like transitions and like an intro part or whatever. It's like, I just get like, I have a plan beforehand, but then I hit the record button and like, we're off to the races,
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So
well, there's value in that too, because I think a lot of people can say that I'm like over structured, but anyways, so that's how it started. It's evolved into, people with bigger platforms because my friends got tired of me, pulling them into my closet and putting my phone in their face. So Taylor helps out a ton, which is awesome. I love co-hosting with him. And so, that's podcasting for me. We'll see. It's probably the easiest work I feel like I've done. Speaking is probably not a primary gifting. I love it, but I don't know. I can still get hung up on, did you like it?
How was it? Sure, for sure. Tell us a little bit about your
vanity there.
Tell us a little bit about your book, Rock, Paper, Scissors. Who's that for?
So what it does is it just tries to take an old story in the gospel, a parable, and relate it to the life that I'm living right now. And so every chapter takes on a parable and tries to give it a new spin. So
Cool.
I wrote it when I was like literally nursing babies. Like I was just alone in the middle of the night, and I discovered that writing made me feel more like me.
That's awesome.
And so I just did more of it. And as I did more of it, I felt more like myself. And I was like, I think maybe I could turn this into a book. And so yeah, that's what happened.
Well,
and I'm proud of it still. So, which is great.
So listeners, if you're looking for kind of an outside the box reflection on some scriptures, I highly recommend Allison. She's like in her podcast, she's often doing like little reflections here and there. I've found them really insightful and just like a fresh take.
Thank you so much.
So check those out.
I really appreciate that.
Let's talk about Gilmore Girls. So Gilmore Girls aired for 7 seasons from 2000 to 2007. And then they had a reunion, a 4-part on Netflix in 2016. And if you grew up in the 2000s, man, like this was the show, I think, especially for young women and any young men who were friends with young women like I was, were subjected to it by proxy.
Yeah, right.
So when I just out of college, I volunteered with the Capuchin Franciscans in New York, and I was in community, and I was the only guy amongst 4 girls, and they were always watching Gilmore Girls. So that was kind of how I was introduced to it. And then when I met my wife, she and her friends were really into it. And for my wife, it's like one of those guilty pleasures. Like I feel like she's rewatched the show like 3 or 4 times. So
it's a comfort show.
Yeah. So I've never watched the show all the way through, but I've caught bits and pieces of it here. So much of my insight here will be from a kind of an outsider perspective, but also like my wife gave me notes. And so, anyway, so what do you love about the show? Why do you think it's great and it speaks to people?
Yeah. So it's funny because I, was a young adult watching it, and I was meeting my husband like about the same time, and I had it on in the background, and I was loving every minute of it. And I keep looking at him like, isn't this great? Isn't this great? And so when it's over, he kind of sits back and very, he tries to be kind about it, but he's like, yeah, I think we're going to like different shows. Cause we were like just starting to get to know each other, and he goes, I'm exhausted. So I think the components that like make it that returnable show, that thing that we return to again and again, that comfort show, is that I think that there's a good amount of predictability and that people are going to communicate well. Like this is a show that is, even if there's conflict, because who would watch it without conflict, right? Like people are going to articulate themselves well. Like they're going to share how they feel really well. And there's comfort in that. It's like, yes, everybody wants to be understood and be understanding, And for me, like the fast pace of it, like the wit that's involved, it is something that you can rewatch and like catch a new joke every single time. Yeah. Like, so that's a huge part of it that makes it, not get old. And I feel like the dialogue is super, super smart. Like the language in this is so tight that it's really, I think I read something that like the average length of a sentence was 5 words, like that was the pace of the show. And so there was something just really, really engaging about, but I think that what wit does and watching people communicate well, I think what that does is it turns these people into our heroes. Yeah. Because we're like, they're saying the things we wish we would have said, whether it's funny or whether it's, truthful, quicker than we would have come to that or whatever. Yeah. So I think that it's cozy. I think that if you could like just take a word, you have these well working relationships. And even if they're not working well, they're at least like saying how they feel pretty well. And so I think that there's a coziness to that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we do like it when people express themselves well, and we like those moments where it's like, man, that was like the perfect thing to say. And so TV can kind of show us that in kind of like an archetypal way. Like that's what it looks like, and we love when we can express ourselves that well and really feel like we've been heard and expressed. I feel like Jesus does that really well when like the woman's caught in adultery and they all want to stone him, and he's like, well, whoever's without sin cast the first stone. It's like a mic drop moment of that was the perfect thing to say. Or should we pay taxes? And he says, whose name is on this? Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, that's like, he has these mic drop moments. So I think there is.
And even the honesty, like the times that he would look at somebody and be like, how much longer must I endure you people? Like that's funny. Yeah. Come on, so just honesty, like well-written honesty.
That's true. Yeah, it is super fast. I think it sped up dialogue on TV generally. And there was a lot more like, kind of, although I think on Gilmore Girls, there was a lot of like long takes, but I think a lot of TV around that time was starting to do more like, cut from here, cut from here, cut from here, cut from here. We go back and forth a lot. And Gilmore Girls was just this fast or faster, but it would kind of, it would keep the camera on the same angle, and then just the dialogue was back and forth. So something that I appreciate about it is it actually feels like a real teenager in high school. Like Rory actually felt like, oh, this is a believable teen. She like looked young enough to actually be a teen. She wasn't like 30 years old pretending to be a teenager. And she actually has parents that she talks to that are a big part of her life. She actually has schoolwork. Like there's so many teen shows, like kind of before Gilmore Girls, like Dawson's Creek and probably more recently things like Pretty Little Liars. It's like their parents don't exist for half the episode, you know, like they don't ever care about school except for the drama. And this was like a kind of a realistic take on what high school and being a teenager is like for probably more the average teenager, you know, and it's not just all hooking up in parties where the parents are out of town and that sort of thing. So
I have a thought about that. So interestingly, I touched on this earlier, but I am in the middle of parenting teenagers. And I've always read, you know, I didn't do a whole lot of reading when my kids were little. I kind of felt like I could get by on talent alone, to be honest. And whether that was true or not, I mean, that's how I felt. And so now I feel really desperate as a parent of teenagers. It's like, I need help. I need support. I need to know more about what I'm doing. And so one of the things that I read was early on was make your house the hangout house. Like you want to be the place where people are comfortable. And as I have worked to do that, it's not by being absent. It's really not. And so it's by being present. It's with a term of endearment and a full candy drawer. That's how it starts. But you want to know what it leads to? This is not an exaggeration. I had 2 of my kids' friends I'm picking up from summer school. My kid is not in summer school, but I'm picking them up from summer school. And they told me something. One thing that I really try to do is not, I try hard to not be shockable so that like my kids can come to me and I'm not going to overreact. You know, I can take it. And so, I was shocked by something they told me that a girl who I knew that something she did and it was sexual related. And it wasn't an act. Well, sorry, it doesn't matter to you, but it was something that I was like, oh, wow, that's what we're dealing with. I did not realize that. And I was like, y'all need so much help. And they said, Miss, we really do. We really, really do. Will you talk to us all? Because there were some kids at my house waiting for me to get back. And they were like, will you talk to us when we get home? And I said, I need to prepare my son that this is about to happen. But like, how do I say no? How do I say no to a group of teenagers who is asking me for help on something that is so easy to mess up? I have to take this moment. And awesome. You know, was it an awkward 30 minutes? Yes, it was. Was it sorely needed? So much so that they took 10 horrible, awkward seconds of their life to ask. You know, and so they are wanting engagement. They are wanting presence. And you're right. That's exactly what Gilmore Girls did is they modeled a healthy relationship. And so much of what my son and I are doing on TikTok, you know, our TikTok is about it's just this content that's through a family lens. It's like super wholesome. And like,
and your son is hilarious, by the way.
Thank you. That's so sweet. And we lean into some stereotypes, you know, it's like he kind of leans into this angsty teen thing and I lean into this overbearing mom thing. But ultimately we hope to put out there, this is a way we can have a conversation, you know, like this is a way to engage. And I get messages all the time that's like, your channel makes me feel like I'm part of a healthy family. Our family relationships are complicated. We need safe places. Gilmore Girls did exactly that with a present parent. Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into the Gilmore Girls. And for me, I feel like, so the premise of the show, listeners, if you haven't watched it or you're not that familiar with, is there's Lorelai Gilmore who got pregnant as a teenager and she has super rich parents and she was kind of like bucking the system of all these expectations of being like super upper crust. She kind of struck out on her own and then had a daughter and kind of lived on her own for a while. But now her daughter Rory is in high school and she's kind of Lorelai's kind of reconnecting with her parents who are super rich. And so there's like 3 generations of Gilmore Girls. There's Emily, who's the grandmother, who was like very well off, kind of overbearing. And then Lorelai, who was the rebellious daughter who got pregnant in high school. And then there's Rory, the granddaughter, who is like a really good kid,
really smart, growing up with a single mom, and just the relationships between all three of them in this little town in Connecticut. And there's like poverty and wealth as a theme, and like, you know, picking yourself up by your bootstraps and doing things on your own, but then like also the privilege of like having wealth and, you know, all that comes with it. And so I want to talk about Rory, Lorelai, and Emily. And I want to start with Rory, the granddaughter. What do you see as her core struggle? Like what is she wrestling with as she grows up from, you know, 15 or 16 when we first meet her to when she's, you know, graduating from college and so forth?
Well, this is going to kind of sound like a complaint about the show. It's like my only complaint about the show is I feel like with Rory, like you have this well-connected, super level-headed, reasonable, thoughtful, smart, like this really well-supported individual, right? And she's just got such a good head on her shoulders. She's an old soul. And I feel like what the show did sometimes is, okay, so, and she's relatable too. Like we like her. Yeah. She's not boring, even though she has all of those things. Like we still like her despite what looks like really a lot of perfection, right? And I feel like they made her relatable. And I feel like there's a balance between being relatable and then like over romanticizing mess ups. Yeah. And I guess what I mean by that is there was like some times where I feel what the show did is they got off script with her and some of how we knew her to be to like make these really wild choices that seemed completely out of character. Yeah. And to me, it was like, they felt and by they, I guess I just mean the writers or directors or whatever, is that they felt committed to, kind of surprising us with plot when we never really cared about the plot as much as we cared about the people. Yeah. And so like Rory would do these things that felt wildly out of character.
So talking about things like when Dean got married and she slept with or like
like sleeping with a married man.
Yes.
Stealing a yacht.
Yeah, exactly.
Dropping out of college. Yeah. Like floundering as an adult, like in the reunion show. Like she never really succeeded. I'm sorry, that's not believable. Yeah. It's not believable that somebody that's at the top of their class in the best high school in the United States, you know what I mean? It's like there were these things that you like expected from her that was okay to expect from her. Yeah. We still loved her, even though she was going to be successful and even though she was going to navigate relationships well. Like you don't need to surprise us with that, you know? So anyways, I just feel like I wanted to keep drawing Rory back to who she was. Yeah. Like, who are you, honey? Who are you? But I don't think it was her fault. I think it was the writer's fault. I think it was a mistake.
Well, so I agree. And I think a lot of people, especially who are fans of the early seasons, they're like, what happened to Rory? Like she kind of turned into somebody that we don't like because she did these like awful things, like even in the reunion years later. But I also think I think you're right. Like probably most people in her situation would have not done those things. But I think if you look at Rory, she's really struggling with expectations of, you know, she's caught between kind of her grandmother and her mother to some extent. And her mother's like, you know, independent woman, you know, I was a single mom. We didn't need your dad. We didn't need your grandparents. You know, we can do it together. We're best friends, even though we're mother, daughter. Like, and so there's kind of this like drive to succeed from there. But then from Emily and her grandfather, there's this, oh, well, you can be what Lorelai wasn't. You can be very, you know, you can be the granddaughter that we're proud of because our daughter was kind of a screw up in these ways. Like she did kind of have those pressures, but then like she's always searching for a father figure, as I think anyone who grows up without a healthy father figure in their life. Like she has, I think her dad's name is Chris. Like she has kind of a fraught relationship with him at times. And then there's the different guys that Lorelai is dating. So I think she does have some ingredients that make her a little less stable than she otherwise would be. And having worked with teenagers for a long time, sometimes it's the kid that you feel like has it all together. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, where'd this come from? Like one of my mentors in youth ministry, her name is Nancy. I worked with her for a long time. She would always say, sometimes 15-year-olds can be 5 one moment and 25 the next. Like they could be totally rational and on top of things. And then all of a sudden in a moment, they have a temper tantrum. Like it just, you never know. And so I think, you know, Rory, as awesome as she was, and level-headed as she was and as likable as she was, like she also had some real obstacles, you know? And I think that can be a something to watch, like a warning sign or a red flag for some of us who are, you know, are high achieving or good at this or good at that or good at the other thing. Like it can be really overwhelming. And in a moment we can just be like, I gotta buck all these expectations, and you do something kind of crazy, you know? So I think you're right in that it's not that realistic, but I've also seen it happen, you know, maybe not quite as crazy as like, you know, stealing a yacht.
That's the thing about shows is that you feel like you know people, you know, it's like, I mean, how many shows have I found myself? I'm like praying for them at night. Yeah. I'm like, Lord, please help the Bravermans. Zach really needs you right now. I really liked her. I didn't feel disappointed by her choices. I mean, we all understand her choices. Like, I mean, everybody wants to quit. These are all like relatable problems, but it's like when you feel like you have understood the fiber of a person, you know, and then they're going, what are you doing?
Okay. So can I ask you a question? Yeah. Let's say you live in Stars Hollow and you are the house that everyone gathers at, and your teenagers are friends with a teenage Rory Gilmore, and she ends up in your car being driven home from somewhere, and you end up with an opportunity, kind of like you did the other day with some of your kids' friends, to speak into her life as a mentor, as a guided, trusted person. Like what advice do you have someone like that who has all these expectations placed on them, who's a really awesome person, but also has some instability in their life? Like what do you say to Rory to help her?
Yeah. Well, I think you brought up a good point that she maybe felt pulled by the two strong women in her life. And so I had this really powerful moment with a girlfriend where I was just in a little bit of a crossroads, and this won't mean much to anyone else, but it was just something between the two of us. But she pounded her fist on the table in front of me and she said, "What do you want? What do you want?" You know? And it's like, I feel like sometimes we think it's self-indulgent to really answer that question. But really though, Rory, not Lorelai, not Emily, you, Rory, what do you want? You know? And then once we can be honest about that question, even if you think it sounds silly, just say it out loud. You know, like, let's just put our goals out there. And then what are some like markable goals that we can do to do that thing? Like, I don't ever think Rory was that great of a journalist. Yeah. I think she's like a little too reflective for that. Like, to me, a journalist is like this hard charging, you know, maybe Emily or Lorelai type of personality. Whereas Rory she's more reflective. I think, you know, she's a novel writer. Yeah. You know, but what do you want? And so there's this, I don't know if it's like a myth or a legend. I don't know if it's, I don't even know that this is accurate, but I read it somewhere, and now I didn't know I was going to say this, so I can't remember, and I should have looked it up. But there's like maybe an African village somewhere where one of their practices when someone has messed up is to bring them in and for their community to tell them all the good things about them. Oh, yeah, right. That's cool. And it's like, that's counterintuitive. Yeah. That's not what we do. Yeah. You know, what we do is we kind of push people out and we want to punish people and say, get your act together, and then we can bring you back in. But to think of a community telling, this is who you are. This is who you can be. This is what we believe about you. This one thing that happened, that's not you. Okay. Yeah. So this thing that happened with Dean, this, you know, impulsive decision that you made to do whatever, this sense of fear and intimidation or fear of failure, whatever it was that made you do this really uncharacteristic thing, that's not who you are. Yeah. Let me remind you when you forget who you are. So that's what I would want to do with Rory. I would want to circle her up. I would want to know for sure, what are your goals? What do you want? Yeah. And then I would want to tell her who she is and tell her that you've got what it takes to do that, you know?
Yeah, what I hear you saying, if it translated into Catholic theology teacher mind that I have, what I hear you saying is discernment and reconciliation. Discernment, one, is like our hearts are a mix and a jumble of, Jesus would say, like the weeds in the wheat, right? Like there's good in us because we're created beautiful children of God in his image, but also like we have this sin that infects us, and like, you know, we're selfish and we need healing and we need to be saved. But at the core, like, we're still good. And so these good desires in our heart, like, find out, what is it that you really want? Do you really want to sleep with a married man? No, you want to feel loved and seen, right? You want to feel known. Like that's really what you want. And like St. Ignatius and so many of the great mystical teachers of the church, they talk about this discernment of the heart and reflecting on what brings you comfort and what brings you distress, and trying to seek out the pure desires of your heart. Like if you can sift out the selfishness, if you can sift out the fear, what's left is the good desires that God has placed in your heart, the good passions that God has placed in your heart. And so that takes prayer, that takes an interior life, that takes conversation with mentors and friends. That's why a good church community is so important. And then the second one, reconciliation. And I love what you said about this maybe apocryphal story of the African village. But it's not that different from reconciliation, the sacrament that we have in the Catholic Church. Go in peace, sin no more. Like there's this, at the end of the day, peace, say a couple of Hail Marys. That's all you got to do. That's your penance.
Well, to get back in communion.
Yeah.
Like
to get back in
whatever
exactly.
because it's not punishment. Like whatever the thing is, it's going to be something that's restorative. It's going to be something that draws you closer, not pushes you further.
Exactly.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, it is really beautiful. All right. So you ready for Lorelei?
Sure.
Let's talk about Lorelei. So let's say we are living in Stars Hollow and Lorelei is part of the community. What would you say is her core struggle, and what do you see her wrestling with throughout the scope of the show?
Okay, so every now and then, when there is a personality that annoys me, it is usually because they remind me of me. And so I get likened to Carrie from Sex and the City all the time. She's my least favorite of all four of them. She annoys the heck out of me. I get likened to Lorelei Gilmore all the time, and she annoys the heck out of me. Now I can step back and see the parts of myself that are, that are in her, that are lovable. But what I would say, the things about her that I love is that she's been really selfless. Like she fights for people and she's perseverant. And by the way, not just perseverant with the things that are easy, but perseverant with the things that are hard. I mean, she stuck through, throughout the course of the show, this very difficult relationship. Why? For the good of her daughter. Yeah. Like that was difficult. That was uncomfortable. That took a great deal of humility and swallowing her pride. There were a lot of things that she had to ask for that she would have rather very much been able to do on her own because she's independent. I love those things about her. I love that she fights for people. I love that she's able to say how she feels really well. I really enjoy that she's a good communicator. Yeah. The things that annoy me is that she's kind of always on. Yeah. It's like, chill out. Like you don't have to be so funny all the time. Yeah. Hold on. Enough of there's like this slick finish or something. It's like drop the act. Like, I know that you have it in you to like make a joke right now or to be funny right now, but like, you don't have to do that all the time. Yeah. So it's almost like I want her to like do less, like calm down, like settle down. It's okay to drop a guard. She feels a little guarded. It feels a little bit like she protects herself with her personality in a way. It's like, even though it draws people in, at the same time, it keeps people right where she wants them, which cannot be all the way in, know? And so you see this in her like relationships, like in her romantic, relationships. It's like things were just always off. And I just feel like there is sometimes with her a lack of vulnerability. I guess that's kind of what it comes down to for me.
Yeah. And I feel like I associate with that a little bit. Like, I feel like I can be a little much too. Sometimes. I can be a little too on, and I definitely have some friends who struggle with this as well. And something that I've tried to develop within myself is just to try to, because one, it's a good quality. Like it's awesome that you can set people at ease and be charismatic. Sure. And magnanimous is the virtue, is the word of the virtue that the church uses to describe someone like that. And I think it's good for a lot of times for us extroverts who, have a big personality, we see all these like humble, silent saints, like there is a role for the magnanimous, extroverted, extra person, but the question I often ask myself the thing that I've set up in my mind is like red flag, watch what you're doing, is whenever I find myself wanting to talk to somebody and I'm like, what's like the perfect way to say this? How do I phrase this so that like it doesn't upset them, you know? And obviously you should try to phrase things in like a good way, but like ultimately, like you just got to be clear, like, cause that can get real easily into being dishonest. You can really easily start doing white lies, bending the truth,
pandering, right?
Pandering. Yeah. And like, sometimes you just you gotta respect the person enough that they can handle it. And I think my wife and I have like really worked this out a lot. And like, it's come to, I have to learn that like, she's a strong enough person that she can take it, you know, and I'm a strong enough person that if she doesn't react great to what I say, I can take it and we're still going to love each other, you know?
Right.
But I think you're right. Like I was talking to a friend, I was like, well, and he was talking about like some problems in his relationship with his girlfriend. And I was like, well, couldn't you say this? And he's like, I could never say that. And so whenever you feel like, well, I could never say that. Like, I think that's a real moment to examine yourself and be like,
for sure,
why can't you say that? you know?
I think there's an element of people pleasing to her.
Amen.
You know, like they're, and you can see it in parenting too. Like from time to time, I really like how she parents, and so you know, certainly it's not perfect, but whose is? But I think that when the people pleasing kind of takes over or trumps some, you know, so for example, when people pleasing trumps honesty, or so being likable, let's say, so when being likable trumps honesty. Or when being likable trumps good discipline or whatever, you know, then we have taken some shortcut to intimacy, like some shortcut to some higher and greater goal. Yeah. So I think that we have a tendency to confuse niceness with love.
Yes.
You know, and so like niceness is like this hallmark version of love, right? Yeah. And Jesus was looking at people saying, how much longer must I endure you? You know? So, and so Jesus did not confuse niceness with love. He was to the point, you know, he did say, the things that people needed to hear. He did let people walk away and not chase after them saying, wait, let me say it better.
Yeah.
Wait. Let me make you understand.
That's true.
He turned and looked at his friends and was like, are you going to go too?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So there's only so much, it's like what you're saying. There's things that are mine and there's things that are yours. And he's a real stickler when it comes to free will. Yeah. Like, this is the truth. This is what's true for me. What's true for you?
Yeah.
You know? And so it's just a more honest conversation. I don't know. I just feel like she's a little snaky.
Yeah, I think so.
Slithery.
Too. Something that I feel like I noticed with Lorelai is she's a very strong-willed person. And you know, being strong-willed is both a blessing and a curse, like most things, like most personality traits. There's ways that it's great, and then there's ways that it can be twisted and go too far. And this, my daughter, who's 6, is very strong-willed, and she and I often have these conversations. You know, I say, you know, the awesome thing about being strong-willed, honey, is that people are going to have a hard time like getting the best of you. You know, if somebody's trying to trick you, if somebody's trying to take advantage of you, if somebody's trying to lead you to do something that's not good, you're going to be a strong enough person to know what's right and say, no, I'm not going to do that. But the bad part of that is sometimes you have a hard time seeing another person's perspective. And sometimes you just pick a fight because you're not getting your way, you know? And so you have to examine yourself and think and really know, like, what is it that I really want? And is this really important to me? And so what I've tried really hard not to do is to like squash her will, right? Because I want a strong-willed, like independent,
tame her spirit, not break it. Yeah,
yes, exactly. So we talk about it, and sometimes she'll ask me, she's like, "Daddy, I feel this way. Is this because I'm strong-willed?" And I'll be like, "Yes."
Nice.
Now with Lorelai, I feel like with Emily, she's like too stubborn, and like she like fights with Emily just to spite her, you know, and like everything is a fight, even when it doesn't have to be. And then in reaction to like her overbearing mother with Rory, she's like too much of a friend, you know, she's like not enough of a parent sometimes. She's like, I don't want to have to pull the mom card. It's like, well, you're the mom. She says that all the time. I don't want to have to pull the mom card. You know, we're supposed to be friends. It's like, well, you're supposed to be friendly with your children, but you're not really supposed to be like friends in the same way, you know? Yeah. And I see you, what you were just describing with your children and your children's friends is they don't just see you as like the cool mom. We're going to go over there and like, she'll let us smoke pot or whatever. You know, it's like, no, they see you as a mentor, you know? And that's something I try to do with my nieces and nephews who are high schoolers or whatever. And, you know, the Uncle Mike persona of like, hey, I'm the guy who's not your parents, who like, you could be silly and goofy around. And like, you know, maybe you can say cuss words around me and I won't care, but like, I'm also going to like tell you what's what, you know? So,
I feel like with her, you know, one of the things you said reminded me, like sometimes people with good intuition can't be talked out of their good intuition, you know? And so it's like, yes, you might have good intuition, but you're not right all the time. And so you see that stubbornness with her mom. But then this like miraculous thing happens through them in this multi-generational setting together, which is so lovely, right? I mean, so, and by the way, it makes the show so expansive. And so in this multi-generational setting, you see their perseverance and you see things shift. You know, like there's a lot of beauty in that. I mean, why do we like Emily? You know, but like we really kind of do. I mean, yes, we know she's not perfect and sure she's annoying and there's things that we'd like to take her aside and say, listen, lady, but by the end of the show, I mean, she has really changed up her parenting. Like she's really changed the way that she interacts with Rory that she did with Lorelai. And how much of that is because of Lorelai's example? How much of that is because of Lorelai's persistence to say, this is the way that I live my life. These are the things that I value and I value connection. We weren't connected and I'm going to do this differently. It's going to take some bravery and it's going to take some learning. I'm going to have to teach myself some new skills, but I value connection. Maybe so much so that it's, you know, that it's maybe even harmful sometimes. I value connection so much that I put it, you know, first and foremost when something else should be. But so I think it shaped Emily.
So we're talking about Emily. What do you see as her change? What do you see as having changed in her?
Well, I just think she had a new opportunity. And grandparents say this all the time. I'm not a grandparent. I have no idea. I cannot imagine loving anything more than I love my kids. I feel beat. So like by the time my kids have kids, I can't imagine pouring into them and be like, good luck. I am cheering for you. So like, I'm sure that I'll get there. But, you know, you hear that from grandparents all the time, that it's just this really beautiful second chance to pour in a different way where a lot of the stress is removed. And so it allows you to just be your best self without feeling like you're at the end of a rope, you know? And so you get to love in a way that you wish you would have. And so that redo is like our best selves. I certainly see that in my own family. I had a good mom, I had a good dad, but the grandparents that they are to my kids, it is something, it is a marvel. It is something else. It's otherworldly. And so I think that we see that in Emily and we have a soft spot for number one, all the things that she did for Rory. But number two, the ways that she was proud of Lorelai at the end. That was all Lorelai ever wanted was for her to be proud of her. And she was always withholding it. She's withholding it. Why can't you be somebody different? And then finally, Lorelai's still who she was. Lorelai did not morph. She didn't get a lobotomy. She was still who she was. And Emily came around to genuinely being proud of her. And that Lorelai wasn't even there. Or I'm sorry, Rory wasn't even there at Lorelai's graduation. It was Emily. It was Emily that was there. Like it's just a really beautiful turn of events. Like it's a really beautiful unexpectation as opposed to the non-beautiful unexpectations to me with like, you know, stepping outside of Rory's character. But I really liked that unexpected development.
I feel like as the show went on, people liked Rory less and less and Emily more and more, you know, and then Lorelai was kind of back and forth, you know?
Right. Yeah. This little pinball. That's accurate, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So those I see as the main three characters on the show. Anything else about Rory, Lorelai, and Emily before there's a couple themes I want to hit, but specifically I don't want to miss anything about those three characters before we move on.
I mean, I feel like people have a lot of investment on the end games of their relationships. Like I don't know that we can move on too quick without talking about the men in these ladies' lives.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, people were so invested in these relationships.
Yes. What do you think were the relationships people were most invested in?
Well, so with Rory,
what were you most invested in?
Yeah. You know, here's the thing is that I think that Rory really only loved Logan. The thing about that is that I don't like Logan. Logan was like this privileged. He couldn't really relate to her. I felt the relationship felt a little too one-sided to me. He wasn't curious enough about the ways that they were different, you know? And so that never felt right to me. I understand he was a good time. I understand that he kind of pulled her out of her shell. That's fine. I like all that. Yeah. And then I get that Dean was like the first love and there's a lot of nostalgia there. I get that. That's fine. That felt a little too conditional, or I don't know. It felt a little too emotional, or like, I don't know. It just wasn't real to me. That's gonna be a hot take. People are not gonna like that, by the way. To me, well, I don't know. I was going to say it's just for me, but here's the thing is that Jess was like this bad boy, and I get that. Like, he's a little broody. Their timing was always off. Like, I get it, but he was her intellectual match. Like, he's the one that really intrigued her. And the truth of the matter is that what it comes down to is Tuesday nights. Who are you interested in talking to on a Tuesday night? Who are you still curious about the things that they think, you know? And that was just for me. Yeah. I do feel like they kind of leaned too hard into this bad boy stereotype. It's like too much of his character development happened off screen. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. Like, you never saw him as a bad boy from his actions on the show. It was just kind of like, ooh, he's Luke's nephew from out of town who grew up rough, you know?
But even the way that he softened her was like supposed to be lovable. It's like, that was all kind of happening off screen. Like, I didn't really see that happen. And so I can't really get full on board, but it's the one that kind of made the most sense for me.
Yeah. I like Jess the best. And, the only reason I'm happy they didn't end up together is because I kind of think Jess was too good for Rory, given the way that Rory ended up. Okay. I also just love Milo Ventimiglia, like in every role that he's in Jack Pearson in This Is Us, Peter Petrelli in Heroes. Like, all the things. He's always Peter Petrelli to me in everything. I just always love him. You know, he was in the Rocky movie as Sylvester Stallone's son. Like, I just love him. So I think maybe there's a little bit of bias there, but I also think like Dean was just like too immature and controlling, and he just wasn't right. Logan, I think, was actually more of a bad boy in terms of like making toxic decisions and encouraging toxic decisions in Rory or validating them. And Jess seemed like he was actually like the good guy, but with a little bit of bad boy exterior, you know, but he seemed like he had Luke to help him out. And so I like Jess the best. So,
by the way, Milo is as delightful in person as he is on screen. I met him. Nice. Yes. My son was in like 2 seconds of This Is Us. Oh, cool. And Don't Blink. And it was so lovely to be on that set. Their connection is very, very real. What you see is what you get.
Yeah, we did a Father's Day episode on This Is Us about a year ago. Cool. So
yes, great show.
A great show. All right. So I think so what other, so we talked about Rory's guys. Let's talk about Lorelai's guys.
I mean, here's the thing. I get the Luke thing. I like a slow burn. I mean, you know, like, that's great. The truth for me is that I just don't think they're all that compatible.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think that they like different things. I think that she's going to just always be kind of like nudging him along, you know, like, they just felt too different to me. It didn't feel realistic. I just don't think they're compatible.
Yeah. So who would have been your Lorelai guy? Who do you think?
I don't know. I think she's impossible.
Sorry. After saying before, both you and I said, oh, there's some things about her that we relate to in ourselves. Now you're saying she's impossible?
Totally impossible. I don't know how my husband does it. He's a saint. Love him so much.
I'll have to ask my wife what she thinks about that. So.
Yeah.
That's funny. So Chris was her, for lack of a better phrase, her baby daddy with Rory, right? That was like her first guy, right? And then there was a guy in between who I'm forgetting, but they were engaged. I think she was engaged at some point to all three of them, but then it like got broken off.
Yeah, which is another thing that just exhausts me.
It happens
on
TV shows. Yeah.
I feel like that. I don't like necessarily in a show when too much emphasis is put on a love life. You know, like, there's a lot to life.
Yeah.
And we might actually be called to singleness. You know, it's like, And that's just never an option on TV. It's like there's this laser focus of only romantic love. Romantic love. It's the end all be all. And so I feel like the show definitely did that. Like, you know, I mean, what if these two wonderful women were called to something different? What about that? You know? And so I don't know. I get it because I can get roped into it too. Like it's intriguing to me too. But I feel like on TV, there's always that overemphasis.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like there's a way to have a thriving single life, and not just in the meantime. Like there's people who are committed to celibacy or committed to singleness, or just end up being single, but end up taking advantage of it and having like awesome lives of service and great friendships and intimacy and
amen.
And
the high beam of love versus that. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Yeah. And adopting, even if they don't have, you know, children of their own, they have like a spiritual fatherhood or a spiritual motherhood, that sort of thing. So yeah. I wanted to ask you about other characters on the show that you really liked. Who else stood out to you as, I guess before we go there, I want to ask about the grandfather, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, Emily's husband. Do you remember his name? Richard. That's right. Yeah. So
is that right?
Yeah, I think so. If it's not right, I'm sure someone will correct us in the comments. But I'm pretty sure it's Richard. Yeah, that makes sense. So, he seems kind of like the most, otherwise it's sometimes being like a doofus. Like he seemed like the most well-adjusted of all the people.
Right.
Ways,
yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I feel like there's kind of this, like doofus, like mumbling, bumbling kind of guy who takes a back seat, you know, a lot of times, and might even like work on the sly, even if it's just a wink or whatever, you know. So there's like some subtext to him, which I always appreciate in a character. But for me, the big win of all of this, whether it's a strong personality like Emily's or somebody more laid back like Richard, who's, you know, a little more peacemaking, even if he was annoying about trying to reconnect Lorelai and Chris all the time, you know, whatever. He had these hopes for her, and underneath it all, you could see that it was love. But the thing that was the most endearing to me was their stick with itness, you know, like nobody was giving up. And so he led that charge, I feel like a lot of times, or acted as a buffer a lot of times that allowed that to be possible. And that's no small thing.
Yeah. You know what that made me think of is when we first found out that my wife was pregnant with our daughter. I grew up in a family of all boys. Most of my cousins are boys. I grew up in a very like male environment. And so I was kind of a little intimidated at the idea of being a girl dad. And so I would ask all the older girl dads that I knew, is like, okay, what's your advice on raising a daughter? And a guy at our church who's kind of a mentor of mine, he said, you know, sometimes there's a thing between daughters and moms, and it's just hard to define. It's hard to explain, but there can be a tension or something comes between them, and you just got to love both of them well, you know, and just make sure you're loving both of them well. And, you know, a lot of times nobody's right, nobody's wrong. It's just the way life is.
There can be two things that are true at the same time.
Yep. Yeah. And so anyway, that's what that made me think of when. So,
you know, as far as like these, you know, relationships that endure, you know, and what are the aspects, whether subtle or overt, that kind of kept it going? I feel like the show really kind of specialized in those things, even if it was like Luke's moodiness, or, you know, like there were just these things that would kind of draw us back in. And it's which is, you know, how I started saying is that my kids like push me to my furthest edge and then pull me right back in again, you know? And so there we are, right back in again. Like, why am I not mad at Luke anymore? I don't know, but I'm not, you know, like, why am I tolerating Emily's, you know, snide comments and, you know, backhanded compliments, you know, I don't know, but I am, here we are. And so I love that commitment to family, because we can so easily, you know, just operate off of a talent for conversation and that's it. And like give ourselves every reason to leave at the first, you know, every excuse to leave when things get hard, you know? So I think that it showed a lot of that endurance.
Yeah, that's true. That's really true. All right. Well, I think we're running out of time here. So I want to, first of all, thank you for being with us, Allison, and for your wisdom on this and just love of Gilmore Girls, but also your very practical wisdom for young people and for all of us. At the end of my episode, I always ask, what's your one takeaway? I promised our listeners at the beginning that we'd give them some actionable things they could take with them as they go. So thinking back through our conversation, is there one takeaway that you would say is like the golden nugget of this conversation that you want to remember?
What about this? What if it was sometimes when we're arguing about something, maybe we're not really arguing about that thing. You know, like it's easy to argue over whether I've asked you to take out the trash or given you a curfew, or maybe we're arguing over that these potatoes need more salt or whatever at Emily's dinner table, when that's not what we're arguing about.
Yep.
What we're arguing about is that I don't feel like I have any independence right now. And the thing that I can't control when you tell me to be home, but I can control being rude to you. So I'm going to be rude to you right now. That's what I can control. And so if we could get more honest about how we feel, then we can have the real conversation. Yeah. Okay. You don't feel like you have any control in the house. Let's make some decisions together then. Okay. You feel like you need some independence or you need a thrill. How can we do that in healthy ways? You know, like what about that conversation? Yeah. That's a different conversation than I asked you, you know, however many times. What if, Mom, I just insulted your cooking. I did that. But it's because I feel like you don't give me any compliments ever. And I'm working my butt off and I've made a lot out of a little and I can't get any acknowledgement, you know? And so what if we had the bravery, the vulnerability to say the things that are beneath the things? And then we have different conversations that lead us to more intimacy, that let us endure a little longer, a little better, to have more connection.
Amen. Amen. I know for me, like the key to finding that subtext, the thing underneath, is prayer, because whenever I notice, like, why am I so upset about this thing? Yeah. Like, I've never been upset about that thing before. Why is this getting blown out of proportion? I know there's something under the surface, and that's a cue to me that I've had, that I've had to develop over the years, is like, all right, this is something I need to take to prayer. I think for me, the one thing I'm taking away from this conversation is what you said. I love the way you phrased it, the stick with itness, or some people might say like the grit or the perseverance, that they really didn't give up on each other. Or even when they were really mad, they always came back and there was that reconciliation. So that's going to be my takeaway going forward. Yeah. Allison, at the end of my episodes, I often ask my guest if they would lead us and the listeners in a prayer to close this out, reflecting on everything we've talked about. Would you do that?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So listeners, wherever you are, let's take a moment to pause and pray.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear God, thank you so much for an ability to appreciate art and give it deeper meaning. What a joy it is to live our lives in this world that you created and draw deeper meaning from the things that we surround ourselves with. I pray that you would give us the bravery and courage. Jesus, lend us your holiness to tell the truth about how we feel, to tell the truth about the things that we're up against. And maybe even more so, God, to create space in our lives so that we know, so that we have that margin to be able to get still. Because if we live our lives off of this to-do list with a hectic pace and chaotic schedule, we can't even know what we're upset about or what we're feeling overwhelmed by or what that truth is. So that we might be drawn into more prayer with you, God. That's our desire. And sometimes it's a desire to want the right things that is the right thing. And so we desire that, God. We desire to know the truth. Will you please carve out time so that it might be revealed to us? And then will you give us the bravery and courage to share that with the people that love us? And as we do that, will you connect us together with endurance and grit and hope and optimism in our relationships so that we might be drawn closer to each other and ultimately closer to you. We ask all of these things in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison, for being here with us. If people want to know more about you and just follow you, where should they go?
Thank you. So Instagram I try to post there. I'm not the best on social media in that I'm inconsistent. I'd like tell the truth on social media and everything. So I think I'm a good follow at Allison M. Sully on Instagram. But I'm just not always very consistent. And then TikTok at Sullivan Family TikTok. And Facebook if you're into all that, but who is lately?
Definitely check out.
Y'all need a break.
Definitely check out Sinner Saint Sister. And if you're looking for some scripture reflections from an unorthodox take, definitely check out Rock, Paper, Scissors. So Allison, thank you so much for being with us. This was a great conversation, and I'm happy to have your perspective on Gilmore Girls and life and being a parent and just being a person in this world trying to make their best with what God has given them. And it's clear that you have a love for God and a love for people. And I really appreciate you sharing your heart with us. So
thank you, Mike. Well, thank you for doing what you do. It's important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Listeners, if this episode has touched you in some way, if you maybe just know somebody who's a Gilmore Girls stan, I really encourage you to share this episode with somebody. Say, hey, I really think you would benefit from this conversation, or just this made me think of you. Send them a text, send them a screenshot, share it with them. That's the best way to help this show grow. That's how this show has grown over the past few years. And it's also a way that you can share the love of God with someone who may need it. And also may they just want to nerd out about Gilmore Girls for an hour or so. So thank you for being with us. If you really want to help our show, you can go to popculturecatechism.com and become a patron of the show. You can choose from 1 of 6 giving levels that fits your monthly budget or your monthly tithe. You can also get some awesome Catholic swag by going to catholicmerch.store, and there's hoodies and mugs and all sorts of cool stuff designed by our team at Awaken Catholic, and all of that supports the shows here at Awaken Catholic. And if you need a speaker or musician, Nick De La Torre, who's the president of Awaken Catholic, or I would love to come out to your parish or your school and do something for you. So all of those are ways that you can help us out. Listeners, we love you. God loves you more, and we will see you next time. But one more thing. I forgot to thank my patrons. So thank you to all our patrons, especially Tom and Emily Cambariati, Carl and Melissa Gore, Stephen Maggie Hubbard, Bob and Lisa Tenney, and all our patrons who participate at popculturecatechism.com. Okay, bye-bye for real. God bless you guys. Take care.